It's the hottest day of summer in Montreal, and there's an ambulance right now that's turning on the street in Parc Extension. The sun is hammering down, there's no shade in sight. The sidewalk's so hot you could literally fry an egg. Residents here brave a heat index well above 40. Cut to 5 blocks away in Outremont. Leafy maples line the road. It's the same 35 degrees Celsius day, but under these trees, it feels mid-20s, almost tolerable. Here, kids play on lawns. A couple might enjoy a breezy porch. So how can one neighborhood be an oasis while another swelters? These aren't different cities. This is Montreal. Same afternoon, but 2 different worlds. During one heatwave, activists in Paris measured 56 degrees on a bare plaza versus 28 degrees in the shade just 1 block over. The culprit? A lack of trees and greenery turning some city blocks into roasting pans. You see, heat isn't just uncomfortable, it can be deadly. In heat island zones, vulnerable people face 20% higher mortality on scorching days. And who lives on the hottest blocks? Often the folks with the fewest resources to cope. In this video, we investigate urban tree canopy, the blanket of leaves above our street, and why it's become a hidden superhero of city life. How can something as a tree lower power bills, prevent floods, and literally save lives? Why do some Montreal neighborhoods have beautiful shade trees while others are concrete jungles? And what can we do about it right now? First of all, let's get on the same page. What do we mean by tree canopy? It's basically the layer of leaves, branches, and treetops that cover the ground when viewed from above. Imagine flying a drone over your neighborhood. The green patches you see, well, that's the canopy. And if 1/4 of the ground is shaded by tree cover, we say canopy is 25%. And cities actually measure this. Here in Montreal, experts use aerial photo and LiDAR, which is laser scanning, to map every tree's crown. The result is a canopy map, often color-coded from sparse to a dense cover. Here is one that I made for Montreal. In 2019, Montreal's canopy was mapped out again, and every few years we do this to see if we're gaining or losing green. Canopy coverage is basically an infrastructure metric, like roads or sewers, because trees are urban infrastructure. Think about it. They cool our streets, absorb rain, and filter air. And we'll dive into those benefits soon, so keep on watching. But the key point here is when we say increase canopy by X percentage, we mean the total area under the shade of the trees. It's a crucial number for city planners, just like kilometers of bike lanes or number of buses. And unlike, say, potholes, trees can actually reproduce on their own. But in a city, we can't just let them grow wild. We have to plan and plant intentionally. We've gotten the boring old definitions out the way. Let's look at Montreal's tree canopy by the numbers. How green is our city today? The latest data around 2019 to 2022 put the citywide canopy at roughly 23 to 25%, meaning about a quarter of the city is under tree cover. The good news, that's up from around 20% in the early 2000s. The bad news, it's been quite a bumpy ride to get here. In fact, around 2017 we hit a peak of about 23 to 24% canopy, but then a villain struck, the emerald ash borer beetle, which killed tens of thousands of ash trees. Across North America, including Montreal, saw canopy drop as sick ash trees were removed. And if your streets didn't look bare a few years ago, that is likely why. Montreal, though, has rallied by planting new trees to replace those losses. City Hall set an initial goal: get to 25% canopy by 2025. And believe it or not, we're basically there. They announced we hit 25% a couple years early thanks to accelerated planting on both public and private land. Now they've upped the target slightly, 26% by 2025. And that might sound like an odd little bump, but that extra 1% means thousands of more trees. And the long-term vision is even bolder. Under the new Montreal 2050 plan, the city wants around 40% canopy by 2050. That puts us in league with places like Toronto's 40% target and Vancouver's 30% goal. It essentially means almost doubling our leafy cover in the next 25 years. But here's the catch. The overall percentage is an average. It hides huge differences across boroughs. Some Montreal neighborhoods are practically urban forests, and others have almost no trees. For example, historically Outremont boasted well over 30% canopy, leafy streets, and big yard. Meanwhile, some place like Saint-Léonard, a densely built post-war area, had under 10% tree cover. Ouch. And it gets starker. The industrial municipality of Montreal Est was measured around 8%, which is basically a concrete desert. The center and west of the island have higher canopy. The east end and some inner city district have much lower, and it's not by accident. And that'll bring us to the next part of our story. If you've ever walked through patches of shade on a hot day, you know the difference a tree can make. Let's talk straight heat. Those Montreal blocks without trees can be summer nightmares. Talking sidewalk temperatures pushing 50, 60, and even 80 degrees Celsius on asphalt. No wonder you see folks walking on the shady side of the street. It can literally be a difference of 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in air temperature between a leafy street, a treeless one. In heat waves, these urban heat islands put lives at risk. Hospitals see more heat exhaustion and heat strokes case from those areas. You see, a study in Toronto found that neighborhoods with less than 5% canopy had 5 times more heat-related ambulance calls than those with just a bit more trees, which is over 5%. In other words, even a small increase in trees could cut emergencies by around 80%, and that would be huge. And you might be wondering, why do trees have such a cooling superpower? And well, there's 3 main reasons. Shade, evaporation, and transpiration. Trees physically block sunlight, keeping surfaces like asphalt and brick from baking in the first place. Their leaves also release water vapor, like natural air conditioners. A single big tree can evaporate hundreds of liters on a hot day, significantly cooling the air. And shade trees around buildings cut down on how much you need to run your AC. In fact, strategically placed trees can reduce home cooling bills by 15 to 30%. And it's not just about comfort, it's about health. Extreme heat causes more deaths annually than pretty much any other weather in Canada. Older adults, people with chronic illnesses, and kids are especially vulnerable. During Montreal's 2018 heat wave, tragically dozens of people died, mostly in low-income, low-tree neighborhoods. And that pattern isn't unique to just us in Montreal. Heat risk maps almost always light up the same areas as low canopy maps. Montreal's public health authorities have warned that as heat waves get worse with climate change, we must cool down these neighborhoods. Trees are one of the cheapest, most effective way to do it. No carbon emissions, no electricity needed. Compare a $300 air conditioning that many can't afford to run versus a tree that cools a whole block for free. And speaking of affording, if you live on a leafy street, your summer electricity bill is probably noticeably lower than someone on a barren block. You see, shade is nature's insulation. Fewer heat emergencies, fewer smog days, and lower household costs. That's what a higher tree canopy can deliver. It's not just about planting trees. You see, there's an uncomfortable truth. In cities, trees often follow money. If you overlay a map of Montreal's canopy with income or housing values, you'll see a pattern. Traditionally, affluent districts, say Westmount, Outremont, or NDG, are green and shaded. Lower income areas such as parts of Hochelaga, Montréal Nord, and Parc Extension have fewer trees, and that's not a coincidence. Some of this goes back decades. Wealthier neighborhoods had the influence and budget to plant and maintain trees, and often more space. Large yard, garden, boulevards, they can grow. Poorer areas, in contrast, especially those with lots of renters or industrial uses, got shortchanged. In the US, they called it the legacy of redlining. Disinvested areas have 15 to 20% less tree cover on average. And while in Montreal it's not as formal a history, but similar forces were definitely at play. Take Parc Extension, a working class, immigrant-heavy neighborhood built with tightly packed duplexes and few street trees. For years, it wasn't a priority for greening. Or Montréal Nord, full of post-war apartments and industry. Not a lot of leafy parks there relative to the population. Meanwhile, Westmount, technically its own city, but right next door, trees lining the street. City data shows that communities with higher poverty rates tend to have less canopy overall. And sadly, those are the same communities that suffer more from heat, pollution, and other issues that trees could help fix. It's a double whammy. The people who could benefit most from shade and cleaner air are living on streets with barren boulevards. One striking example is Outremont's 34% canopy versus Saint-Léonard's 9%. Outremont is old money, lots of big trees. Saint-Léonard more modest and heavily concrete. Even within a single borough, the nicer streets often have tree-lined avenues, while the poorer parts have little. So this is totally an equity issue. The good news though is that city planners are now acutely aware of this. There's something called tree equity, the idea that every neighborhood should have sufficient canopy to keep people healthy. Montreal's latest planting program explicitly targets low canopy sectors, which are often low-income sectors, for extra tree love, and we'll hopefully see see some good examples of this soon. But first, let's address a question some folks might ask. In a growing city that needs housing and development, how do we make room for all these trees? You might be thinking, okay, just plant more trees. But when you try to plant a tree on an urban street, reality hit. Where sidewalks are crammed with stuff. Hydro poles, wires overhead, water mains and sewer lines below, not to mention streetlights, signage, driveways, you name it, it probably has it. Montreal's older neighborhoods often have very narrow setbacks. The space between buildings and streets are slim or none at all. Typically, think of Plateau or Centre-Sud streets with row houses. The front doors open almost right onto the sidewalk, so finding a spot to squeeze in a tree there is quite tricky without blocking the path or accessibility. Then there's also infrastructure conflict. Tree roots and city pipelines historically aren't best friends. Neither have branches and power line. Luckily, in newer developments, utilities can be buried deeper or routed smartly to avoid roots, but retrofitting that underground in old areas costs a fortune. Another perceived conflict is tree versus housing density. Some worry that if we densify, which is build more housing, especially affordable housing, we'll lose trees. There have been high-profile cases of tree cuts for new buildings, causing public outcry. And while it can happen, it doesn't have to. Urban designers actually have solutions to integrate trees with development. And I don't want to get too technical, but I'll have a link down below to the script. You can read a bit about more of these solutions. All that to say is that we need to start thinking outside the box, and it's happening. You ever notice those little curb bump outs at intersections? Well, Montreal has been greening those. You take a boring stretch of curb used for parking, extend the sidewalk a bit, and voila, space for a tree. Or even 3. And a rain garden. You see, the city has built vegetated curb extensions that calm traffic and add trees. Ville-Marie borough alone put in 21 of these green bump outs in the last few years. That's a win-win in my eyes. Safer crossings and new tree habitat. But what about emergency access or winter snow clearance? And those are valid concerns. Fire trucks need to reach buildings. Snow plows need to space to push snow. Don't want to plant big trees in spots that will block fire engine ladders or where plows will pile snowbanks. But there's plenty of other curb length that can host a tree without causing a winter headache. It just takes coordinated planning between arborists and city work. Finally, let's bust the myth that trees are a luxury that conflicts with housing. In reality, trees can increase property values and make higher density living more pleasant. Who doesn't want a view of green from their apartment? It's not trees versus housing, it's trees and housing. We need both, and smart design lets us have both. Take a moment though and zoom out and see who's cracking the canopy challenge to inspire what Montreal could do. While researching, well, I figured out we don't need to look that far away. You see, right here at home, the borough of Verdun offers a great case. Verdun was once very gray with lots of concrete. But over the past decade, they have embarked on a greening spree, planting thousands of trees, converting asphalt lots into parks, and even deep paving schoolyards. Verdun's canopy increased significantly. They targeted heat islands around large housing blocks and along busy boulevards like Wellington. And now Wellington Street is not only a hip foodie destination, it's getting greener medians and sidewalk trees that make strolling it a joy even in summer. The borough also engaged citizens with adopted tree programs. Verdun isn't at the top canopy-wise, but it's on the rise and shows how political will and community involvement can turn a barren area greener quickly. Another Canadian example is Toronto, our neighbor. It currently has about 31% canopy, a bit higher than Montreal, and they've set a 40% target, and interestingly enough, they're using an AI mapping tool to ensure tree equity. The city partnered with American Forest to create a tree equity score map. It identifies neighborhoods with low tree cover and high vulnerability, so they can prioritize planting there. One such area is the inner suburb of Scarborough, where they're doing mass plantings in sparse apartment block complexes. Also, Toronto massively boosted its tree planting budget, doubling it over a decade, and enforces strict tree protection bylaws. Cutting a mature tree on private property requires a permit and replacement. This isn't to say they haven't had setbacks like the ice storm in 2013, which damaged many trees, but overall, Toronto's urban forest is growing. Another cool initiative is they're engaging healthcare. Doctors can literally prescribe a patient a nature walk, and the city ensures parks in needy areas are well treated as a form of preventative health. To look at a global example, we can look at Paris. It's made headlines by declaring war on heat islands after the brutal 2019 heat wave. The city is planting 170,000 new trees by 2026, transforming some iconic hotspots like the plaza in front of City Hall and near the Eiffel Tower into green spaces. They even created urban forests in small squares, densely planting dozens of trees where once there was concrete. The idea is to achieve natural cooling of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius in those districts. Paris also opened parks at night during heat waves and incentivized citizens to plant gardens on building facades and rooftops. They call trees their best allies against climate change. Seeing one of Europe's most built-out cities find space for trees and is pretty inspirational. If Paris can do it, Montreal certainly can. And by the way, many European cities like London and Barcelona have ambitious canopy or leaf cover targets. For example, London wants to be 50% green by 2050. The common thread in all these examples is a clear plan, innovative use of space, and treating trees as essential city infrastructure. Whether it's pocket forests in Paris or equity mapping in Toronto, these cities are not just planting willy-nilly, they're planting smart. Montreal is starting to do the same with our own twist. We've got the Plan Climat and Plan Nature commitment. Now it's about execution. So let's talk about what you and I can do to help with that. The resident, whether you rent or own, you have a voice. One simple thing: if you have a yard or even a tiny strip of grass, plant a tree. Programs like Plateau-Mont-Royal sells affordable trees for residents, even helps with choosing the right species. A small fruit tree in your yard or a hardy maple in that front lawn equals instant canopy boost on your property. If you don't have space, maybe your building owner does. Ask if they'd consider adding a tree or even a shrub. Often landlords focus on mowing the grass, but a tree can elevate the property. And yes, in some cases, even its value. Also, water the street trees on your block, especially new planting. The city can't water them all frequently. Adopt that tree. A few buckets in the dry weeks will ensure it survives and thrives. I've even seen people decorate the base of the tree with flowers. For community groups, join or start a neighborhood greening club. Montreal has eco-quartiers in each borough that organizes tree plantings and giveaways. Volunteering for a spring or a fall tree planting event is a fantastic way to meet neighbors and improve your area. Community gardens can also integrate trees. If your local school or community center yards is all asphalt, get folks together to push for a greening project. There are grants and city programs now specifically for depaving and greening communal spaces. But the single most important, I would say, is educate and inspire others. Share why trees are not just nice to have, but life-saving infrastructure, especially as our summers get hotter. Once people see that giant oak in the park as a community guardian, cleaning our air, shading our kids, they'll fight to keep and replicate it. Montreal's climate future can be daunting, but boosting our tree canopy is one of the most tangible, positive things we can do. It's relatively low tech, it's beautiful, and it brings people together. So let's roll up our sleeves and get planting.